So, I will start with this question about why is that relevant to know about feedback in teams? Yeah, the first answer you all know, and this is why you're here. So we know that we use more and more teams. So that's why you're here. You know that teams are relevant nowadays in a lot of organizations. And, they have to adapt, they have to be resilient, like Lida said. And we want those teams like to learn fast, to adapt fast, to innovate, to find solutions to really complex issues. But we know that they don't do that perfectly at day one. So we know that teams need to learn to be highly effective. And one of the core questions of that learning path is how to speed it up. How to make the team quickly effective. And you'll probably say, some of you already mentioned, like Lida, you said feedback is usually one of the freaking answers, like to move teams forward. And providing effective feedback to teams means that we give them some information about different things. We can then give them information about their actions, about events they went through, about their processes, about their performance, about their behaviors, for example, resilient behavior. And it has a motivational effect. So it kind of like motivates team, to change, but also has a learning effect where teams use strategies to reduce this gap between the actual performance and what they want to achieve. So the goals or the targets, whether you have given them those or whether they set those. So it's important to know also that if a team is able to improve teamwork, we know from a lot of research in team effectiveness that they would likely be 20 to 25% more effective. And so they would likely succeed more than if they don't improve their teamwork. So that's a key point of why we need to know about that. Second important point is, still today, and I'm still surprised when I see that, but it's still true in a lot of organizations in France or anywhere else. Feedback often is a kind of one-way process where you have a manager in a company that gives feedback to somebody else. And the focus is really on the person giving the feedback. It's not on the feedback receiver, the person who actually has to do something, the feedback, to change the behavior. So the first step is, to consider feedback as a conversation and instead of a one-way practice. And we know that it matters a lot. Second issue we see in practice is that, I'm going to cite what we learned earlier in the first presentation about people have differing perceptions. We see things differently, because this is how we function, our brain functions like that. So it's the same for feedback exchanges. So usually feedback givers and receivers do not have the same perceptions of the quality of the feedback. And there are a lot of surveys, in France, but also in other countries that would say that usually the people giving feedback perceive that their feedback is great. So it's highly effective. And unfortunately, feedback receivers would say we don't receive enough feedback and feedback is not of high quality. And there is this research in teams that also shows that, they perceive that feedback is not accurate enough, doesn't help them perform better, is not useful for practice, like an immediate use. So that's really important if you want teams to change, if you want teams to improve their behaviors and have better performance, they need to perceive it as being highly positive. Otherwise, they won't act upon it. So, so this brings it to this, this idea that, I give great feedback, but you probably, process it incorrectly. So it's about communication, right? Feedback is not something you throw at a person, but a process where two people communicate. And we have to take into account, we have to take to understand, to have insights about what is happening in the team's, brains, in the team's conversations after feedback delivery to ensure it makes effects. And to end this relevance slide, I wanted to quote, I love sports, and I think sports is a good example, like to make this feedback thing understandable for people. And a good coach is a coach that gives feedback, but also considers that the team has a say in this feedback process. And Sir Alex Ferguson, who was actually pretty famous for leading a lot of teams to success, but also facilitating the feedback processes, has said that after each defeat, the team must reflect, learn, and bounce back with even more confidence than before. And this is really one of the core, piece of this article. It's about really what is happening in there, and really enough, this is a kind of black box in research and sometimes in practice, where we believe we give feedback, and you'll have a lot of papers on how to give great feedback, but you don't have a lot of papers on how to facilitate it. So it's actually truly beneficial to the team. So I told you it's all about team processes. It's not about only the feedback giver. And if we take all your context from previous presentation, you see it matters to analyze the teamwork environment to understand what kinds of processes can emerge from that. So I wanted to take a different one, like imagine like research team, research and development team, and they have specific conditions. They have to develop a new hybrid car for VW. So I make it up. Of course, in those teams, you expect a lot of creative behaviors. You expect a lot of sharing, of ideas. You expect a lot of disagreements also. You expect a lot of constructive conflict where you have to convince others about the quality of some ideas. So you will see all those behaviors and processes that are individual and team related that appears in a specific context. And then, of course, if these behaviors, like resilience is one of them, is the process. If these are effective, we know that you can increase performance. And a core point in that is that it's important to understand that you can provide feedback on both. And I would say, everybody knows that if you give a team, information back about their performance, it can improve their performance. But a lot of people don't know that they can also use this process feedback. So it would be, for example, again, relying on previous presentations, that you give feedback on what you observed, resilient behaviors. It could be, share the air behaviors. Does the team equally participate in the team? Does the team gently express ideas? Does the team, take into account others' ideas to create a new one? So all of this is called process feedback. So it's the next important advice I would give, is also give process feedback, because research shows also that process feedback can also improve team functioning. And we know team functioning is highly related to team performance. And of course, there is a retroactive effect, because we expect that feedback is not something, that is organized at one time and point, and that you just assume is going to be enough for until the next project. So it's important, you engage into this loop of feedback processes, so that teams give a lot of have a lot of moments where feedback is reflected upon and used. To follow up on that, I wanted to give you some insights about some work I've done and with my colleagues, like you see here from 2012. So it's research, it's a literature review that I've written with my colleagues from Maastricht University in 2012. And we questioned really this this question of, is feedback really effective in teams? And if yes, under which condition? There is a really obvious answer to that you probably all know. You need feedback that is of high quality, and high quality is like feedback should be accurate, so really based on facts, on observed behaviors. It should be regular. It should be given timely, so not too far from the performance. It should be shared, fairly distributed in the team. So we know that those qualities are really important, but it's not enough. We also know that feedback is more effective in certain situations. So I'll give you the example of the project teams. When you have people with different functions working in a team, so imagine like the research and development team where you have engineers, you have other people working together with different different disciplines, and usually they don't speak the same language, or they have to come up with some agreements. So feedback is even more effective in those settings. And another example is like feedback is more effective when it's combined with goal setting. So when you have a clear goal that is set by the team, it's even better. It's feedback is more effective because you can always compare your actual performance with the goal you set together before. And another important thing that comes up for like since 1979 in reviews of feedback in teams and in organizations, it must be perceived as being accurate, relevant, useful, but also processed. So the team should cognitively process it. And with a colleague with whom I've been working on since a couple of years now, we also said that it has to be emotionally processed. And unfortunately, in 2012, we discovered like some weird things like that. The studies were missing. This was a black box, and this was already a black box in 1979 in a review by Ilgen, like that said, we don't know about the psychological processes through which feedback is actually working in teams. So some years later, it was weird again that we don't have answers to that. So this is how we started to do this bunch of research studies where we try to better grasp what is happening there. So the idea is that we want to change teams from this I perspective, where this is a person perceiving feedback, to we process feedback and we do something about it. And we turned the coin in our studies by stating that we have to consider the posture of receivers. And receivers, they need to receive feedback to learn. It should be systematic, specific, and it should be given in loops, so not one time, once in an annual review. And second point, teams should engage in this active learning process where they reflect upon this feedback and also plan how to use it in the future. What we did is that we observed some teams. I'm going to put my plug for my laptop at the same time. Sorry for that. We discovered also that when we were observing teams that would receive some feedback about a complex task, that those teams, they were given time to read a feedback file about really specific, answers, that they had to complete. And we coded their reflective behaviors. And we were surprised to see that not a lot of teams are actually engaging in this team reflection when feedback was provided to them. So they would just go through the feedback form, showing, what they were doing great and what or not the mistakes they were doing. And they were just doing that. They were not discussing it. They were not planning anything so much. But at the same time, there were some teams that we observed, again, qualitatively. We saw that when they were reflecting after the action, so after they completing a task, what we call transition phase. So it's when, the task is finished and we have time before we start a new one. And when reflection at the team level happens at that stage, it can increase future performance. But again, not a lot of teams did that. And we did find some, positive relations between team reflection and errors teams are making in both ways. So when teams are making mistakes, usually it triggered at the next task some reflective behaviors. And the same, if they were reflecting during transition, it would improve their performance. So we had a couple of conclusions that, again, fuel these recommendations. We discovered that feedback and reflection could go hand to hand, and it was a dynamic concept. But this reflection after feedback, what we put in the black box, was actually scarce and not really efficient. So then you're going to see that, my conclusion is, okay, if teams don't do it naturally, we have to stimulate that reflection because it is effective. So then we decided to do this, simulation with, teams that were put together in a flight simulation. I think it's really cool if you want to try one day. So they were shared, like they were sharing the different instruments that you needed a plane. They didn't know each other. They one had the throttle, so one had the possibility to pitch the plane up and down, and the other one had the gas. So it was pretty interesting. It's like driving a car with two people. And they didn't know each other. It's a new team. It's a new task. Nobody had any experiences with this flight simulation from Microsoft. And we wanted to observe, three conditions. One in which you have no feedback, one in which you have performance feedback, and another one in which you have performance feedback. And what I will explain is called guided reflection. So you see that also that we have different planes and different missions, and it's getting more and more complex. And during the timeout, they had, either no feedback, nothing. They just had free time to do whenever they liked, or they received this really specific feedback. And as I told you, we applied these recommendations of what good feedback is, really detailed, immediate, specific, based on facts. And then the last conditions, they had that, and they had some instructions to guide reflection upon feedback. There was no facilitator, so they just had a sheet that they had to use 3 times. So it's important to say here. So based on this feedback, can you explain as a team and discuss why you achieved success or had difficulties during the mission? Can you give examples of effective behaviors, strategies, methods? And we explained that those could be team strategies or task strategies. For example, task would be, when I put some gas, you pitch down, sorry. And then the second step is like, what can we do differently? Like, how there are alternatives in how we approach the task that could improve your performance. And the last one is set a goal, specific goal, and develop strategies for the next mission, since we had this dynamic progression. That's what we found. So you can see that all the teams start at the same level. Obviously, performance goes down for everybody because it's more and more complex, more and more dense. So they have overwhelming information through headphones. Like that's part of the game, because if you give the same task, of course you expect them to learn it and to do it almost automatically. What is interesting is that the last condition with both intervention, they're a lot better. It's significant, and they have a faster learning rate. So they get a ton too. They get this really amazing improved performance. But at the end, it doesn't change anymore. So we could of course assume that there was fatigue. Boardroom, it's 2.5 hours. So they get really tired. Then there is no facilitator to really force them to continue this. There is no difference between feedback and no feedback. So basically, that's interesting because some research has been like mixed. So we don't know if feedback is always effective in this setting. It didn't make any difference if people didn't get feedback. So conclusion I can share with you are that feedback is only beneficial when feedback receivers are active players. So, and when they reflect on what is going on and what they plan to do. So, and as we've seen in the qualitative study I presented, like teams don't do it naturally. So it's important to stimulate this co-reflection on the past to define the path for the future. We know also that guided reflection as a mini intervention like we did can fade away over time. So it's important to think about additional strategies like facilitator, asking difficult questions to teams, kind of like managing motivation to keep on doing it over time. So I will end with this. So if I have to choose a few tips for you to, to facilitate feedback. So of course, if you are an expert, you can give regular, explicit, accurate, timely feedback to teams on their performance, how they perform, but also, the process feedback I just explained to you. It's important that the teams do not jump to the next stage, to the next task without having timeouts and space for them to proactively make sense of this, what happened and why and what they can do differently. And to avoid this, the fact that people get bored with interventions like that, keep an eye on the team so we can challenge team members in their thinking process. So we can help them even attain better, higher, deeper level of reflection so they can constructively discuss ideas that can be different and different solutions. And of course, it's also part of the paper practice because, Deloitte study on the trend of human performance in 2020 has actually said that a lot of managers do not know how to provide feedback to teams and coach teams effectively. So that's a big point. It's like, everybody needs practice to this new way of seeing feedback.